said to you off camera, well, first let me start by saying how much I enjoyed this movie. I had a blast with it. But as I said off camera, I want to jump into something else. I was a huge fan of Quarry.
Thank you.
So the big thing I want to know is, as a fan of the series, did you ever find out what season 2 might have been about?
No, I didn't, is the quick answer. I know there was even talk of maybe an animated season 2 at one point. I heard whispers after kind of everything fell to the wayside. So no, I actually don't know what would have happened to Matt Conley.
When you think back on the making of the series, is there like something you will always remember? You know, like either a day or two of filming, just something that like always, when you think back on the show, that's what you remember.
I remember a lot of hard days on that show, and rewarding in that way.
Sure.
But that was a very hard story to tell emotionally and physically, and everything about it I loved, the cast crew, you know. So it was sad that it didn't get another chance, you know, to shine.
Sure. When I speak to a lot of actors, some talk about how when they're playing a role, no matter... Let me ask you this question. When you leave set for whatever you're doing, are you able to flip the switch and go back to being you? Or does a piece of that character come home with you while you are shooting something and sort of like to keep you in that zone?
I would say I'm pretty good about switching off any of the dark. I got kids, there's no time for dark. I don't want to bring that home to them. That said, when I'm working with accents, I tend to live in the accent always. It's just, I don't ever want to have to reach for it. So that the accent's normally there 24/7. It also helps with men and women in suits. They just don't want to hear accents unless they're always hearing accents. So that's always been my trick. I'd say that'd be the only baggage I bring home is just a vocal quality.
Sure, because what I'm wondering is with Quarry, that was a complicated character. And, you know, and I'm just curious when you were filming that, because a lot of people don't realize when you're doing TV, I mean, it can be 14, 16-hour days, you know, and I'm just curious if that must have been a little bit different.
No doubt. And not only that, we cross-bordered that entire series when we shot it. So you were not just shooting, you know, an episode, you were shooting potentially 5 or 6 per day scenes. So that emotional track, physical track, story arc had to be mapped out from day one. But when you put in those kinds of hours and you give it your all, you sleep well at night.
Sure.
At least I do.
Completely. I spoke to Liev Schreiber about Ray Donovan, and he talked to me about how that's a challenging role for him because it's a physical and emotional role, and he said it's something that, you know, it's a challenge.
No doubt. I mean, you know, I think you try, you know, your best, but a lot of the times, you know, you only go home. Like when you're forced, you got 8 hours between the time you get out of hair and makeup to going back in it. So, you know, you sleep as the character.
Completely.
You know, and that's it. That's all you got time for.
Jumping into why I got to talk to you today, so I really dug this movie. Talk a little bit about, I mean, a little generic, but like, how did you get involved in the project, and what was it about the script that said, I want to do this?
I got involved with the project through a mutual friend of Lee's and my own, actually, and he slipped me the script and he said, "Hey, my friend wrote this. I think they might offer it to you. You should read it." And I was at that stage in my career. I was shooting something that was taking 16 hours, so I normally don't try to read the next job when I'm putting in those kinds of hours. But I read it, and it's just one of those, you know, moments where you just read the script top to bottom like that, and usually it's good when you do that. And so I met with Lee. We both decided pretty quickly we wanted to make the same movie. We both weren't idiots or crazy. And, you know, and about 4 months later, we were shooting.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's a very fast turnaround.
No doubt, yeah. And it was an opportunity that was presenting itself to act head to toe, which I had yet to be given in my career. And I'm a guy who comes from the stage. You tell your stories head to toe. And so my first instinct was I was absolutely terrified of it, knowing what it demanded. And not just physically. I knew what it needed and demanded emotionally. That's the only way you were going to root for that guy. And also the ugliness of the experience of a quadriplegic. And so I knew there was a lot of work to be done. So even though we were shooting in 4 months later, there was a lot of work put in those 4 months.
Completely. The other thing you mentioned is that this is a performance that demands everything from you in terms of physically, just everything. What was the thing that, while filming, that you felt like most challenged by?
Well, when we were filming, the hardest part for me was the sitting. Was playing the quadriplegic, Gray, disabled. I worked extensively with a guy about 3 hours north of here who's experienced this being quadriplegic, and he was so vital in my research and allowing me not just to interrogate him and impose myself in his life, but he really let me see behind the curtain and see the ugly side and understand his experience from day one to where he is now. He's been quadriplegic for 9 years, has 3 boys, and so just carrying that duty, but more than anything, his hands were very important to me in this. So if it wasn't Gray's hands or his silhouette, hunched over silhouette, juxtaposing his upright posture as STEM, I was also telling a story with the quadriplegic's hands juxtaposed with STEM's hands, which I was actually basing off a video game, a character from a video game. So hands were very important to me in this, in the making of this, and they were very hard to hold in a position, and I will say that was physically the most demanding, actually, of the whole movie, was playing Gray's quadriplegic.
There's a few, but there are some kick-ass action scenes in this movie. They looked visually really cool, and I'm sure challenging to film. What was it like? I don't want to spoil anything, but what was it like filming certain sequences? Because they looked great.
Thanks. Well, I mean, it was a lot like rubbing your belly and patting your head, and we busted our butts for months ahead, trying to find. The thing we knew we didn't want was a robot. We wanted something that was much more malleable and efficient, more bamboo than brick, and so we worked for over a month before pre-pro, every day, getting up at 5, training, and then stretching, which was the hardest part, with the movement coach, Darren Inkster, who helped design the silhouette. And, it was all about getting me neutralized so that I could start from a place where this could be a placeholder while we're learning these dances, this choreography. So I wouldn't put any muscle memory from that work onto Gray, who's having a completely different experience in those fights, sure, and is an emotional passenger, and hopefully is reflective of what people are feeling. So he's speaking and experiencing the same awe that the audience is seeing.
Completely. I speak to a lot of actors, and some love the Eastwood method of shooting the rehearsal, doing a take or two, and they're like kind of spent. And others love the Fincher method of like 50 takes, 60 takes. Where do you typically like to work in that environment, and how was it making this film?
I think it just depends on the scene for me. I don't think I've ever walked away from a scene being like, ugh, I wish I hadn't done those 2 takes. Oh, we did 2 takes too many. I'm somebody who will never feel like we got it right. And I'm an actor who wants to give the director as many different cuts as he can for his edit. Sure. Because that's usually, you want to need and not have, than have and not need as a director. So I try to always give different takes. And so for me, you can't do enough takes, but some physically you're drained by the end. But I think it just depends on the scene, as to how finished I feel, with the work.
Sure. When you got the script, obviously you guys were working on it before you. How did the script change while you were on set as a result of any reason? Whether it be a location, whether it be you thought of something better. How did that alter?
Well, the script didn't really alter once we started shooting because, Lee had to really whittle down, I think, what was maybe at one point kind of a $40 million movie to a $5 million movie, because that's Blumhouse's model,
Sure.
And we had to work within that space, which I think is a great way to work. It keeps you hungry, and it keeps you it keeps your imagination always on point. And if there was one element, though, I think that surprised Lee and myself was when we started, especially with that first, fight scene, we realized in going after it ruthlessly for the truth of it and the experience, it found an absurdity. It was a newfound absurdity in it, and I think Lee really tapped into that. Like, wow, this is actually feels more like buddy cop, and I had Simon Maiden who voices STEM in my ear the entire time, so that's real. It's a real time relationship that's happening. That's not something we put in post. So all of that to say, I think when I got to set that day for the first fight, I really didn't know what was going to happen, because it was going to simply be finally a collision of the emotional story I'd been working on the side with to this whole fight and clinical dance choreography that we had been busting our butts with, and I think we found something pretty new.
Totally. You touched on the budget a little bit. I wanted to touch on it that I can't, I saw the Blumhouse logo when the movie started, and I'm like, oh, I know it's going to be, it's a finite budget. And then I'm watching the movie, and I was stunned by how big it looks for knowing that it was not made for a lot of money. What surprised you when you were watching the final version or on set, where you're like, I can't believe we are able to do this?
Well, I was pretty in awe of Felicity. Felicity Abbott was the production designer, and I was pretty in awe of the production design as is. But certainly, I didn't see it until South by, because Lee kept it very close. I'm glad he did. The augmentation, there's no CGI, on the day. That's all the practical prosthetic effects, those money shots. That's rare, and that was in this movie. We really had only a couple of chances at some of these effects. They were real. They were brick and mortar. So I knew going into it that was either going to play well and or not, because there's scrutiny there.
Sure.
But it was more the accenting augmentation that really helped make a truly realized future with Felicity's foundation that Lee put in, that I was really surprised by. And just little tricks that don't cost anything, but that were obviously communicated from the very beginning with Lee and understood in his mind.
Totally. Listen, again, congrats on the movie. Totally recommend it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.